On tonight's episode of Locked On Lightning, we talk about the most surprising Bolts player from this past season, round one predictions, and are the Tampa Bay Lightning favorites in this series against the Florida Panthers? All that coming up and more on Locked On Lightning.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And welcome to another episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. I'm your host, Adam Danker. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Locked On Lightning. This show is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and I'm a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on the classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go now free on the App Store or Google Play. On this episode, we're talking about the most surprising player from this team. And what I mean by that is the most surprising performance we have seen this year. We talk about round one predictions, as well as we wrap things up with some talk about, could the Lightning potentially be the favorite in this upcoming series, round one against the Florida Panthers? But before we grab any of those topics, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. We're also available on YouTube, so go ahead and subscribe to our channel there. Hit that notification button so as soon as the newest episode drops, you will be notified. So this season, I'll start off by saying this season, all things considered, was a very good season because obviously not only because the Lightning made the playoffs, but how it started. And really we went from it really being the Nikita Kucherov show to kind of being more of a team feel in the latter months of this season. And, there's a lot of performances we could talk about, and we'll discuss more about that in the offseason when we get to player grades. And when I look at this Tampa Bay Lightning team and we talk about Kucherov season, we could talk about point season. We could talk about Stamkos this season. But when you're looking at this team this year, and I don't think to a certain, I think everybody, obviously nobody could have really predicted the season Kuch was going to have, or the season really Point was going to have, or even Stamkos. But when you look at this Tampa Bay Lightning team, for the most part, especially the top six, had a very good season. I don't know if we want to include Anthony Duclair in that conversation because he barely played. He's only really played a month with this team. But the player that sticks out to me when I'm thinking about some of the players that really contributed all year long, and that was Nick Paul. Nick Paul was really, if you had to pick, not just based on numbers, but based on just overall contribution and how much they meant to the team this year, I think he's probably, top three, top four, depending on how high you are on Stamkos this season. Outside of Kucherov, Point obviously is a second. But, really, when you look at it, Nick Paul had the most surprising season, I think, out of any Lightning player this year. Because when you're looking at his stats and his averages, coming into this season, he's coming off a season where he matched the season a career high in games played. He's coming off a year in which he set a career high in goals and matched a career high in points. And the fact that he really just demolished all those, really all of those expectations, I think, because I think we could really say with a lot of confidence that, when you play a certain way and we could agree to disagree that he has kind of set a very high bar for himself since he's been in Tampa Bay. But with how he has really played this year with those numbers and how he has been able to just really be there for this team every single game, whether it be on the third line, whether it be when he was splitting time on the second line, when Anthony Cirelli was out, it really shows you how versatile his game has really grown since he's come to Tampa Bay. And if you want to break it down more, I mean, this guy has really been the model of consistency outside of Nikita Kucherov, because if you look at his splits, home and away, he has 12 on the road, 12 goals on the road, and 12 at home. He has a little bit more distribution rate, obviously, at home with 17 assists. But the guy has really done a phenomenal job. I mean, even diving deeper into the stats, in games that the Lightning have won this year, his split is 21 goals, 39 points. His plus minus is absolutely through the roof on there. And really, if you even go month by month, the guy has really been consistent. I mean, he only got stronger as the year went on. In the month of April, through 9 games, he had 5 goals and 7 points. I mean, how much more do we really have to be impressed by Nick Paul? I mean, even when he's not scoring points, even when he's not really, just when you don't think that he's really putting up an offensive performance, he's doing other things. And we've talked about this, and this really can be applied to a good number of the Lightning players on this team. And really that is something that I think that a lot of people sleep on when they talk about the Tampa Bay Lightning, is that really the scorers are just more than scorers on this team. On a good night, they're really able to do anything you really need them to do. And Nick Paul was really the definition of that this year, outside of Nikita Kucherov. And the fact that the Lightning signed him as early on in his career for the amount of money that they did, for the amount of term that they will have him for, was nothing short of a steal. It was a little bit of an interesting signing at that point in time, obviously being up against the cap. But at the end of the day, Julian Brees-Boss once again continues to impress me. Everything except the Jeannot trade, he has really done a phenomenal job with. And Nick Paul was really the first big trade that set up the Tampa Bay Lightning for the future. And the best part about this is that he is continuing to grow. He's continuing to develop. And if you thought last year was a great year, and if you thought this year was a phenomenal year, which it was, obviously his best career year thus far, I firmly believe, like what we've seen from Braden Point, Brandon Hagel, he's going to continue to get better. And I cannot wait to see what his ceiling looks like. So let me know in the comments below. Do you agree with my assessment? Do you feel like Nick Paul was the most surprising player from this Tampa Bay Lightning team this season? Obviously, I mean, the easy one is Cooch because of just the phenomenal season that he had. Was there another player that you had in mind? And I will challenge you all, do not, if you're going to comment on the video, do not put Nikita Kucherov. You could put anybody else on this team except Kucherov for the most surprising performance this season. So coming up in just a little bit, we're going to talk about our round one predictions against the Florida Panthers. How long do we expect the series to go? Who are going to be the top guys, at least for the Lightning? I'm going to save the Panthers part for tomorrow because we'll be sitting down with Locked On Panthers host Armando Velez. He'll be giving us the rundown with the Panthers there. So coming up in just a little bit, we'll be talking about that. But first, let's talk about our first sponsor on today's show, and that is our friends over at Monopoly Go. Now, listen up, everybody. If you've been a listener for this show for quite some time, you know how competitive I am. And we all are very competitive. We all have that competitive side. Now, my competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great twist on Monopoly where you play not on one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part is messing with your friends. You could charge them rent on iconic properties, just like the classic Monopoly. But now you could also heist their vaults of riches for yourself. And the leaderboards show you who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. But it's not just your competitive side that loves it. You could team up with your friends and people all around the world in time tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in on the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. So as always, I'm going to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. If you haven't already done so, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. We're also available on YouTube, so go ahead, subscribe to our channel there. And we just got done talking about most surprising performance this year, Nick Paul. Now, I think the even more surprising outcome from this season or performance would be to not only play the Panthers in the first round of the playoffs, which I mean, if you would have asked me who the Lightning were going to play in the first round of the playoffs back in October, I probably would have said Toronto. Maybe that's more so because just, I don't know. There's something about playing Toronto in the playoffs that necessarily doesn't entail the fact that they lose in the first round every single year. But the fact that we're getting a Battle of Florida in the first round of the playoffs after really the last month that the Lightning have had, I mean, it's nothing short of a phenomenal, very entertaining beginning to the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs. And there's going to be a lot of people, and we'll talk more about this in the second half, the latter half of the show. There's a lot of people, obviously, that have the Lightning as losers in this one. There is a lot of people that are going to be writing off the Tampa Bay Lightning, and that goes hand in hand with my first prediction that I firmly believe that, because I've seen it on Twitter, I've seen it in a couple of articles since yesterday. There's a lot of people that are saying the Panthers are going to win in 5. And I unless the Lightning completely collapse and are just a complete regression from what we've seen them over the last couple of weeks, I can't imagine really a scenario in which that would happen. The Panthers are a good team, 100% acknowledging that, but to suggest that the Lightning are just going to roll over in 5 is just really nothing short of foolish. So that is why my first prediction will be the fact that I think this series goes to at least 6, maybe 7, depending on who the team is down going into Game 6. I just think that this series is going to get really rowdy, really rough, real quick. And the added flavor of these two teams being in-state rivals and the history that they have had over the last couple of years and the success as well that they have had, it's going to make for a fun playoff series. And I think that a lot of Panthers fans, as well as I'm sure the players from a couple of years ago, are very well aware and definitely have this in the back of their minds that it wasn't too long ago that the Tampa Bay Lightning swept the Florida Panthers, who were supposed to, who were the President's Trophy winners that year. And so that shows you that, really nothing is guaranteed. And I firmly believe that with this. They won the division. That's great. Good for them. Rather them than Boston. But that doesn't necessarily make you better in a best of 7. And like I've said before, I think that it's, the longer you let the Lightning stay in the series, the more dangerous they become. And I think at the end of the day, as cliche as it is, I still think what this series is going to go down towards, it's going to be goaltending. It's going to be discipline. And I think that we're at the sweet spot in the year for Andrei Vasilevskiy, not because of his past performances in the playoffs. No, it's because he's significantly more rested at this point in time than maybe Sergei Bobrovsky is, because of missing that time to begin the season, and Cooper hasn't really pushed him all that much, especially down the stretch coming into the last couple of weeks of the season. And I think that's why I'm really inclined to say that I really think that we will see a shutout in this series from Andrei Vasilevskiy. Now, as to what game, we could very well see it in game 1. We could see it in the later stages, 4, 5, maybe. That's also a possibility because Vasilevskiy in the first round kind of starts off a little slow, starts to gradually pick it up as the series goes on. So really the Lightning are going to have to kind of stand their ground early on in the series, allow Vasilevskiy to get settled and to get acclimated, because as many times as you have played playoff games, I don't think that you could just easily settle into a playoff game like you would maybe a regular season playoff game. I think, everyone has kind of like that, especially in games 1 and 2, and then the game 3 where you're on the road or in a different building, especially if you're the visitor. It also, it might take you maybe 2-3 games to get going, especially as a goaltender. So, but I really think, having said that, I think that is a prime chance for Vasilevskiy, even being kind of behind the 8 ball to start things off, because the Panthers will have home ice in this series. I still think that, that is something in the back of everyone's mind to almost expect, is that we're going to see a shutout from him. And then the last one, I think think that something tells me we're going to see a very big series from Steven Stamkos. I think that he has been super hot over the last couple of weeks. Just a very rejuvenated Stamkos, just a guy that is playing like he was in the early stages of his career. And this is the most relaxed I have seen him in probably a couple of years. And I think he's going to play a huge part of this offense against the Florida Panthers. So those are my predictions. Let me know in the comments below. What are yours? Do yours align with where I'm at? We'll probably have more predictions on tomorrow's show. with Armando Velez. Please go ahead and tune in with that. So in just a little bit, we're going to talk about could the possibility of Tampa, whether it be in going into the series or as the series goes on, the Lightning shifting from underdogs to favorites, or could they even be considered favorites from the onset? We talk about that coming up in just a little bit, but we're going to talk about our last sponsor of today's show, and that is our friends over at Policygenius. Now, life insurance is incredibly important in today's society. You know, with you never know, with all the crazy things going on in the world, with all the crazy viruses going around and everything going on, you never know when it might be your time, okay? And you have loved ones, you have family members that you care about. You always want to make sure that you have things in order for when you're out of the picture, they are taken care of. Policygenius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace that saves you time and money so you could provide your family with financial safety net starting today. Now, Policygenius helps you compare your options from top companies and their team of licensed experts on hand to help talk you through it. Talk to a team of award-winning agents who will walk with you through the process step by step, easily compare quotes from other America's top insurers in just a few clicks to find your lowest rate. So check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com/LockedOnNHL or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/LockedOnNHL. So one last time, I want to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. If you haven't already done so, please go ahead, follow us on our social media pages at LO_Lightning on Twitter, as well as LockedOn_Lightning on Instagram. If you want to tweet out to me or send me a message on the side, you go ahead at DankyDank, DENKYD8NK. Love hearing from all of you. So obviously with where the Lightning are in the standings ending the season, the first wild card team, coupled with their not really stellar performances that we have seen them have in the 3 meetings with Florida this year, a lot of people, as they're inclined to do, have already ruled out the Lightning of winning this series, where it's funny how like the tune has changed really over the last couple of days or really weeks, because when the Lightning were playing well, I mean, they were playing well over the last couple of weeks. I mean, those 3 straight losses were just kind of a minor setback. I think that a lot of people were of opposing teams were in unison in the agreement that really nobody wanted to play Tampa in the first round. And then as soon as Tampa gets a matchup, boom, they have no chances. And it's just amusing to me how the other fan bases in the NHL, whether it be when we're talking about Nikita Kucherov, his chances of winning the Hart Trophy, and now talking about Tampa Bay Lightning, their chances as a team in the playoffs, how they go from, oh, this team's good, we don't want to play them, to boom, we're playing them, they don't stand a chance. And this is not a shot at Florida Panther fans. Those shots will be coming tomorrow, so stay tuned for that. And if you've been a listener of this podcast, you know me pretty well by now. You know those shots are locked and loaded and ready for tomorrow. But I look at this series, and I truly mean this. You may not believe me when I say this. When I look at this series, and I look at it from an unbiased point of view, when I evaluate playoff teams, I don't care if it's the first round, the second round, the conference finals, Stanley Cup final, I kind of throw reason to the wayside, because that's just, unless, like last year's final, Vegas was just so much better. I mean, there was really nothing Florida could have done. And I don't think there was any team coming out of the East that would have done even better. So, but when I'm evaluating two teams in the playoffs, I look at history. And what I mean when I look at history, I look at their past playoff history. So really the last 5 years, I think, is a good measuring stick, unless you've had your team like Boston, who has lost a lot of veterans over the last 5 years, kind of going through a changing period. Whereas that is not really the case with Tampa. Their core is mostly together, where Florida is kind of in the middle of building a group of guys who could potentially be a winning team for years to come. And obviously their hopes are to not only get to where Tampa was a couple of years ago, but surpass that. But when I look at this series between these two teams, and I am completely honest when I say this, I'm completely unbiased when I say this, that Tampa has the edge. They have the edge that no one's talking about, because you have guys on this team, whether they were on the two Stanley Cup winning teams, or if they were on that team that lost to Colorado, or even like a guy like Anthony Duclair, who has been there before as recently as last year. And you couple that with his talent, how can you look at me with a straight face, Lightning fan or not? If you're a Panthers fan, please comment below. Really, honestly, I want to hear your reasonings, your sound reasonings as to why, if you are falling in that class, why does Florida have so much more of a significant advantage over Tampa Bay, where majority of the guys on this team have 2 rings, have been to Stanley Cup final, have been on that long road, know what it takes to get there. Whereas you guys have only been that deep as early as recently as last year. Let me know. I'm curious, because I want to know both sides. Obviously, we're going to get both sides tomorrow. But I think you're really going to see, as I alluded to before, the longer this series goes on, a lot of people are going to start jumping ship from, especially if Florida cannot close the deal, or if Tampa keeps tying it up and then Florida takes the advantage and then Tampa ties it up, and then boom, we find ourselves in Game 7. Especially if it gets to 6 and 7 and Vasilevsky's playing well. I mean, I don't know how you could really not put money on Tampa Bay. I've not seen the odds, by the way, for I don't think they put them up yet on FanDuel. But when they do, we are gonna post that, because I definitely want to know. I mean, I know that the Panthers are Game 1 favorites, but I want to know the overall odds of the series if and when FanDuel publishes that, which hopefully we could get those odds by tomorrow. Because I really think that FanDuel and the other booking sportsbook sites, they're really going to give, I think, Tampa a lot more of a closer edge than maybe some might not think. And then as soon as people see that, a lot of people are going to start, taking a step back and realizing, holy crap, Tampa might actually have a chance to not only win this series, but end it relatively quickly. And I think that they can. And it all comes down to experience, baby. So let me know in the comments below what you think. We'll talk about this tomorrow, obviously, with Armando if we get a chance to it. I mean, we have a lot of stuff to talk about on tomorrow's show, so tune in for that. Like I said, we're going to have Armando Velez of Locked On Florida Panthers on a crossover episode, a special preview episode of this first round series between the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Florida Panthers. We'll be previewing it all, asking all the hard-hitting questions, as well as answering them, and you don't want to miss out on that. So go ahead, subscribe to the podcast, follow us wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. We're also available on YouTube. Hit the notification bell if you listen or watch us on an app. So as soon as the new episode drops, you'll be notified and be able to watch or listen to it. So that's been it for this episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Danker. I'll talk to you in the next one.